Hello. Um, Check make sure this thing's on. I've done that. This will be a quick F1 update. I need to. I'm going to start separating these onto my other channel. But anyway, so today was the first official day of preseason practice or preseason testing. Excuse me. So we actually got some coverage. Um, First and foremost, no, I am not happy about the whole Apple TV deal. I'm going to find a way around it myself personally because, sorry, I refuse to give Apple my money. Of course, there's still a big stink going on about Mercedes power units and their compression ratio, and everyone's screaming, "Oh, it's illegal." The part that keeps tripping me up about this, and I've heard this previously before when Mercedes and other teams, not just Mercedes, but other teams have come up with different innovative solutions. For example, when Mercedes came out with their DAS or dual axis steering, turns out it really wasn't that much of a performance gain, and it got banned for the next season and stuff. It's not like in the 70s and 80s when teams could just show up with new parts and upgrades to their power units undeclared and pre-authorized. You just show up with shit. You can't do that anymore. So the thing about the Mercedes compression ratio is the FIA had to sign off on that months and months ago, if not even upwards of possibly even a year ago at some point. Mercedes had to submit drawings and technical specs and all this other crap and say, hey, is this approved or not? And the FIA had to have approved it already. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. So I guess that's the part that always, amazes me is everyone acts like this is some big surprise. No, it's not. This shit's been known in the background. And the other teams probably knew about it months ago. You know, that in this year in the regs, every 6 races there's I can't remember what the acronym is, but basically it's an opportunity for people to upgrade their power units to try to level the playing field. The last generation and generation before that, the power units were frozen. So, and of course, a lot of people are talking about how Mercedes is basically threatening legal proceedings, which they have every right to. If Mercedes is as good as they are, I'm sure they have documentation that prove it. Say, hey, no, you already approved this. You can't turn around and then turn around and say, oh no, we're not going to allow you to do this because the other teams didn't figure it out and they're fucking whining and bitching. Not this season, anyway. I mean, it's like people are just unrealistic about that. $1 billion fucking industry, and you think you're going to make one manufacturer who supplies 4 different teams change their power unit a month before the first race of the season? You're out of your fucking mind. Sorry, but you are. It's just not going to happen. You know. And personally, I don't think they should be punished for their innovation. I really don't. Um, I don't think it's going to be as much of a performance gain in the races as what everyone's speculating. Um, I think ultimately it's going to come out to more efficiency than anything, and not necessarily a raw power advantage, which a lot of people are claiming. Yes, on paper and in theory, it could be up to 15 horsepower more and up to 3/10 a second per lap, yada, yada, yada. But there's a lot of other things people aren't taking into consideration. You got to look at the system as a whole. You know, um, look at what an increasing compression ratio will do. Okay, obviously it'll raise the temperature, so forth and so on, volume displacement, yada, yada, yada. Well, the MGUK, which is the electric engine slash generator that charges the battery now and everything else, is 3 times the size it was. So a lot of that is going to get dumped directly into that. So I think it's going to equal basically an efficiency not only in their recharge rates, which that's another thing a lot of people aren't talking about. There's a cap on the amount of energy they can put into the batteries per lap. There's a maximum. A lot of people aren't factoring that in either. And nobody's talking about the new fuels. That's going to make a huge difference. Or the fact that, the fuel capacity alone has gone from 110 kilograms down to 70 for the same race distance. So there's a reduction of what, 30, 40% in fuel, amount of fuel you can burn. Yeah, so I don't think it's going to equate raw power or 0.3 of a second per lap. On certain circuits, possibly. Those that are not extremely limited, I guess, on the electrical deployment and charging, but with how much they're relying on that now, I, I can't think of any off the top of my head. I've yet to do the research really, so. But hey, this is just my opinion, my speculation. It's going to be an interesting season for sure. You know, the cars definitely look a lot livelier, a lot more maneuverable because obviously they're a bit lighter. They're a bit smaller, not as much as what you'd think, but enough to make a difference. Um, totally different types of power bands now, um, which is going to be interesting. The real interesting thing is the amount of torque that's available. Um, so we'll see how that plays out. But needless to say, it was good to actually see cars on track. That was nice. So yeah, I'm not going to get into a whole lot of the speculation and rumor mill and all that shit. I'm just going to kind of wait for the season to start and we'll go from there. But I just wanted to put my 2 cents in on that.